Hello and welcome back. Previously I told you an example. I asked you to do an example of a national insurance contribution. Now please go back to that example. If you have already downloaded your notes, that's fine. If you haven't, please make sure you download it and come to your example on page 18, please. Actually, I'm going to share the screen with you as well this time. Here you go. I've shared the screen on page 18. It says NIC, Employment and Self-Employment. Now I told you that please make sure you calculate it. Now assuming that self-employed's NI is coming lower than NI of employed, so we are assuming that. Now if every time this happens, if it happens every time self-employed is paying less NI and employed is paying more NI, then what happens is that everybody tries to be a self-employed. Everybody tries to pretend a self-employed. Not only from Susan's point of view, that Susan is a self-employed, that's why she is paying less tax. Now in other cases as well, say for example if someone is working for someone, say for example if I'm working for AccountancyTube, I am working for AccountancyTube. Although I am working for AccountancyTube, so if I'm getting salary, I will have to pay NI. Which NI? Class 1 NI on the salary. Now not only I will have to pay NI, but AccountancyTube will also have to pay NI. Which one? Class 1 secondary NI. Now I hope that you would appreciate the fact that if I'm employed by AccountancyTube, I am paying NI and AccountancyTube is paying NI. So we are paying two NIs on the same salary. Now assuming that AccountancyTube boss, he said to me that, you know, why don't we show you as a self-employed, because you're coming here and you say to HMRC, we show you in the books as self-employed. Now if AccountancyTube shows me self-employed, then what will happen is not only my NI will be lower, but there won't be any NI payable by AccountancyTube as far as my salary is concerned. So if I'm self-employed, then AccountancyTube won't be paying any class 1 secondary NI. I hope you would appreciate the fact. So if this happen again and again, then everybody will try to be self-employed and everybody try to show themselves as self-employed. Now years and years ago I used to work for a company. It was a property management company. Now when they hired me and then when I started to work, then my boss spoke to me and said, why don't you show yourself as self-employed? Now the reason of them saying this was that they will be saving some NI, because they won't have to pay NI on my salary. So they will be paying less NI and I might well be paying less NI as well. So that was the reason that that boss spoke to me about that. Now I didn't agree to that and I explained the situation to him that we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because there is a legislation. Which legislation? IR35 Rules. Intermediary Legislation 35. Now please come to next page, which is page 19, where it says Employment and Self-Employment. Now when these things are very, very complex, like I said, I can show myself as self-employed in order to save NI. How will HMRC determine that someone is employed or self-employed? Now there are a list of things. By looking at these things, you can know if someone is employed or self-employed. Now I've already shared the screen with you. I assume you can see it. Now the following factors, I'm reading it, the following factors should be considered to distinguish whether a person is employed or self-employed. So if there was no rule at all, everybody would be trying to show themselves as self-employed, so there won't be any employees and there won't be any class 1 secondary NI, because everybody would ask their employees to be a self-employed, they would be saving some tax. But they can't do that because of rules. So HMRC will read these rules. Who is employed and who is self-employed? Here's a list. First one, it says employment involves contract of services, whereas self-employment involves contract for services. So this one is a contract for, this one is a contract of services, what I had, because this is my contract of providing the services, contract of providing the lectures. Whereas someone who comes to, say for example, do this lighting in my studio here, that person had a contract for services, contract for putting lights here, and contract for setting this camera up and making this studio soundproof. So that was contract for services, right? Now the next one is degree of control exercised over the person doing the work. So degree of control, if I am working here, does my boss can control me or not? This will determine. If they can control me, I will be employee. If they can't control me, I'll be self-employed. The next one, it says next one is whether he must accept further work. Now if my boss says that you must accept this work, now for example I'm doing P6 lectures, then my boss pops into the studio after I finish and he says, could you please take P2 lectures as well? Then it says, could you please take P3 lectures as well? Could you please do P4 as well? So if he keep pushing me towards more and more work and I keep doing it, it means it means I must accept further work, and it eventually means I am employed. If I say I can't do it, then I am self-employed. The next one, it says whether the other party must provide further work. Excuse me. Now if my boss must provide further work, that will also indicate employment. Now whether he provide his own equipment. Now if I came here into the studio and I bought my own suit, I bought my own camera, I bought my own, I'm paying rent for the studio, and I bought my own iPad as well. So if I did all of these expenses, then I will be a self-employed instead of employed, because I'm providing equipment, I'm providing for this studio. Alright, so if I provide my own equipment, then I will be self-employed rather than employed. Whether he hires his own helpers. So if I hire my own helpers to do this bit, then I'll be self-employed, otherwise employed. Whether he hires his own helpers, then the next one is what degree of financial risk he takes. If I take any financial risk, that will be also considered as self-employment. The next one is what degree of responsibility for the investment and management he takes. Do I take any responsibility of investment and management? No, I don't think so. If no, then I am employed by AccountancyTube. The next one, it says whether he can profit from sound management. Can I profit from sound management? If my management is good, can I profit from this one? If yes, I am self-employed. If no, I am employed. The next one is whether he can work when he chooses. So is it up to me when I come into the studio and do the lecture? Can I say that I will come in the end of March? Can I say that? Of course not, because the students are preparing for the March attempt. Now these lectures aren't going to be helpful after March. So these lectures are only helpful for March 2017 attempt. So my boss is going to say you can go out of the AccountancyTube studio, because these lectures aren't of any help after March. So I must do this when my boss says that. So I can't do on my own time. So it indicates that I am employed. So the next one, it says the wording used in an agreement between the parties. So whatever my contract is, what was the wording in the contract? I will have to see the contract again. I don't know, I can't remember it, but I assume that the wording will say I am employed by AccountancyTube. Alright, so these was a list which can show you, which can indicate whether you are employed or self-employed. So when you are sitting in the exam hall, you are confused and you can't determine if someone is employed or self-employed, then try to use these set of criteria and try to measure that if someone is employed or self-employed. So how can you measure it? what was the wording used, who is providing the equipment, is someone who is doing the services, can he, is he taking any financial risk, right? So likewise, you will have to see all the measures which we have just seen. All right. Now, after seeing that, after looking at that, if someone pretends to be self-employed, whereas he actually is employed, then these rules will come. What are the rules? It is personal service companies. Now, what happens is, like I gave you the example of myself, I used to work for a company long ago. It was a property management company, right? So if it was a property management company, they told me to be a self-employed rather than employed. So if they told me to be self-employed, what if I would have agreed? So what I would be doing, instead of being employed, I will show myself as self-employed. So this is called personal service company. So what I will be doing is, I won't be providing services directly to them, but I will put an intermediary between them, and I will say this is my company and I'm working for this company, and then I'm providing services through this company to my client. So if I'm employed, I'm providing services directly to client. If I'm self-employed, I am providing the services through an intermediary which is in between myself and the client. So that is where the personal service companies come. Now before and after, there are two scenarios here. Now before, what the employee used to do was that there was an employer, and employer was paying the salary to the employee. All right, as you can see on the screen. Now the employer was giving salary to the employee, and the employee was taxpayer, right? So it was payment of salary. Whereas what they thought after, that employer is a client, but there is a service company which is personal service company in between them, and then taxpayer is providing services through a company, and the employer is paying invoice to the company. So it is exactly the same thing. It is just this bit in the between, which is personal service company. They have just made up the company, and the same person is providing services through a company. So if it happens in the question, if someone tries to be too smart and tries to be play up with the rules, play up with the HMRC, then what HMRC says, if anyone is doing like that, then read the following paragraph. It says, taxpayers normally prefer to be classified as self-employed rather than employees, as this results in less taxation and NIT. Right? There are anti-avoidance rules known as IR35 provisions. So it is intermediary legislation 35 provisions, which prevents employees avoiding tax and NIC through offering their services through an intermediary, such as personal service companies. Now, such service company may pay the worker minimum salary and pay as much as dividend, resulting in overall reduction in applicable income tax rates and NIs. Now, I hope you would appreciate the fact that when someone is trying to put a company in between, now he will have to eventually withdraw the salary out of it, isn't it? Now, what they do is, when they make a personal service company, so instead of dealing directly with the client and getting paid in shape of salary, they put a company in between them, a made-up company which is called personal service company. But the client will pay to the company, but eventually, the service provider will have to withdraw the money from the company, isn't it? But how can he withdraw? Either he can take as much salary as he wants, or what he can do is he can take in shape of dividends. Now, I hope you know from your earlier lessons that dividends have less tax, very less tax, especially at the basic rate band. It is 10%. So that's how they do. Now, they put a company in between them and client, and they take as much dividend as possible out of the company and very less salary. Right? That's what he is saying here. The client and the worker, such that if the service was performed by the worker under a contract between himself and the client, then he would have been regarded as employee. Then in such case, the payment to worker will be subject to pay and NIC, and it will be as follows. Now, sorry, did I miss something? I think I missed something. I will read again. Taxpayers normally prefer to be classified as self-employed, then blah blah blah, known as IR35 provisions, which prevent employee avoiding tax and NICs through offering their services and pay minimum salary and pay as much as dividend as possible. And after that I've already read. Now whoever is trying to play with the rules and do like that, HMRC has made a pro forma for them. Now if someone is trying to be employed rather than someone is trying to be self-employed rather than employed, then please make sure you remember and memorize this pro forma and take into account like this. So what we'll have to do if someone is trying to be smart, HMRC will say that we'll take 95% of all payments and benefits received from the client. So we'll forget about the intermediary. We'll see how much he's getting out of the client in shape of payments and benefits. We'll take 95% of that, then we will deduct. What we will deduct? Expenses which are followed as allowable deductions. Alright? So we'll take the allowable deductions out of that, then we'll deduct the expenses incurred in performance of the duties. We'll also deduct the capital allowances on the plant and machinery. We'll see later what capital allowances are, but it is simply a depreciation. You can say in taxation depreciation is called capital allowance. So it is a capital allowance on plant and machinery used. Then in the next one it says deduct any salary and pension contribution and employer NI paid by the third parties. So if employer has paid any NI, now who is the employer here? Who is the employer? Now eventual employer is the client, but they have put an intermediary between them, right? So we'll deduct any salary and pension contributions and employer's NIC paid by the third party. So third party here is a personal service company. So we will deduct the employer NIC as well, because he's taking the salary from personal service company. So we'll total that, whatever the total is, then we will deduct the deemed employer's NIC payment. Now in order to calculate this deemed employer's NIC payment, what we'll have to do is we'll have to take that figure and we'll have to multiply it by 13.8% divided by 113.8. So that way we can deduct the deemed employer NIC payment. So when we deduct that, the net answer would be deemed employment income. Now you will have to memorize this formula. You'll have to memorize this this pro forma, because this is important, and I would say it is very, very important as far as March 2017 attempt is concerned. So examiner is likely to examine this one. Alright, so please make sure you memorize this. Now on page 21, if you come to page 21 please, this is a test. Now we have already covered basic employment income. There are still some left additional aspects of employment income on next page, which is page 22, but so far we have already covered employment income. Now this test will cover almost each and everything which we have seen so far. Excuse me. So please make sure you do that and allow yourself 30 minutes, and please make sure at this level now, because there isn't much time left to the exam, right? So please make sure at this level you try to make yourself familiar with the exam level question and try to do the questions under exam pressure, under time pressure. So that's why I mentioned here your allowed time is 30 minutes. So please make sure you do that in 30 minutes. All right? So that is it, I think, for this lecture. Please make sure you do that. In the next lecture I will also go through with you, so you can check if you went wrong or if you did right. All right? So that's it for now, and I will see you in the next lecture with this example, and then we will see a little bit more about employment income. All right? So that's it, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you and goodbye.